Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone from Abuja, Nigeria, and anywhere in the world. We are currently listening, or anybody worldwide are currently listening or watching this. My name is Imasichukwu Okoli. I'm the project officer at Nigerian Startup Bill. I would like to especially welcome everyone to the fourth learning series titled. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loudly.
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Great. So I would like to welcome everyone to the fourth learning series titled Investing in Infrastructure as a Tool for Economic Recovery. And this is supported by SEDIN GIZ. So this learning series started on the 21st of October, and we've had like amazing sessions. We've had like 3 sessions already. And, for each session, we brought different panelists and moderator every week. This series was born out of an idea to reflect on the Nigerian Startup Bill and generally talk about the state of affairs within the tech ecosystem. Would like to encourage you to join us and follow us on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Keep up to date with our events. And our series. We have 2 more series coming up later in the year. We'll announce that as it comes. So we are currently streaming this session live on YouTube, and we encourage you to share with your network and invite everyone to join this session. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Tomiwa Aladekomo, the CEO at Big Cabal Media. Thank you so much, everyone. Mr. Tomiwa, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. The Nigerian Startup Bill has been in progress for a few months, and there are a lot of people working really hard on it. It's exciting to have some of those people here with us, as well as some other members of the technology ecosystem to talk about sort of issues around startups and specifically infrastructure today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope it will be an interesting and engaging session. I'm going to start by introducing the speakers that we have here with us today. I will start with Nkechi Oguchi. Nkechi is a business strategist. She's passionate about building great businesses in Africa. Nkechi was the CEO of Venture Spark for 5 years, and during this time, she led a team working to catalyze innovation and entrepreneurship in Africa by providing reliable and accessible work infrastructure. She spent the last 7 years in executive positions and been a keynote speaker and panelist at various events. She's also a mentor and advisor to several founders. Nkechi is currently an MBA candidate at the Edinburgh Business School, Henry Watt University, and she's a proud alumnus of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana, and the Institute of Commercial Management, UK. Welcome, Nkechi. If you're okay, you're muted. But yes, anyway. Nkechi, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here.
Excellent. We've also got Ife Adebayo with us, who I'm sure quite a few people are familiar with. Ife is an IT business analyst with experience in systems analysis, software architecture, and IT project management. A member of the British Computer Society, he is currently the special assistant to the Vice President on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and he advises His Excellency the Vice President about issues on technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. He's done extensive work on the Nigeria Startup Bill, and he develops programs and coordinates activities with various government agencies to support the growth of tech, encourage innovation, and provide an enabling environment for technology entrepreneurs and tech startups. He's part of the team that set up structures for social development, job creation, and economic team in the Office of the Vice President, and also formulated the structure for operations and teams within the VP's office for effective management of the economy. Welcome, Ife.
Thanks, Tomide, thanks, Tomiwa, for having me. Apologies about that.
Yeah. Anna Calado is the Executive Director of AfriLabs, which is a network organization of 292 technology innovation hubs spread across 49 countries on the continent. She leads AfriLabs to develop programs and build partnerships that support innovation hubs all over the continent and other stakeholders that are raising high potential entrepreneurs to stimulate economic growth and social development in Africa. Anna is an international speaker, trainer, innovator, innovation system, ecosystem builder, and mentor. She's also an advisor among several advisory roles, she's a member of the advisory board at the African European Innovation Partnership. She chairs the working party of the AFCFTA negotiations, e-commerce forum Africa, and is a mentor at the Google Launchpad Accelerator Africa for entrepreneurs. She's also the regional innovation lead Africa at the EdTech Hub. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Tomoa. Glad to be here.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least is Yen Choi. Yen has 27 years of experience in telecommunications, IT, broadcasting, and technology development. He's the co-founder and group chief technical officer of Netcom Africa, which provides fiber optic and wireless network connections, managed IT services, data centers, ERP solutions, data security, data analytics solutions to major enterprises in Nigeria since 2004. Yen is also a founding board member and chair of the technical committee of the Internet Exchange Point of Nigeria, IXPN. IXPN is one of the largest and fastest growing exchange points in Africa and connects all major internet companies and content providers to reduce the latency of data traffic in Nigeria. So speeding up the internet, basically. Yen is also chairman of Swedish-based Ignitia.se, which is an agri-technology company providing AI-based hyper-accurate weather data services to over 1.8 million farmers in West Africa. He's active in the Nigerian startup ecosystem and advises a lot of startups, as well as aerospace companies in the United States on satellite design and manned space travel. Hi, Yen. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tomoa. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. I'm Tomoa Ladikam. I'm the CEO of Big Cabal Media. We publish Tech Cabal and Zikoko. Tech Cabal covers the business and the human impact of technology across the continent. Zikoko is a youth publication, touching on all the things that matter to young people. I'm super excited to be here. Clearly an impressive panel of people with a lot of skin in the game and understanding of sort of the infrastructure needs of technology ecosystems that are developing. I'm going to jump into the questions directly. We'll take some questions from the audience towards the end of our conversation. But just to kick it off, I'm going to ask broadly across the room. Over the last 4 weeks, during these sessions, we've learned how capital, regulation, and talent affect startups in the technology ecosystem or in an economy that's growing more and more dependent on technology. So today we're going to talk about the role infrastructure plays. And just broadly, I'm going to ask Yen to kind of lead off this conversation. What role does infrastructure play in startup development and growth?
Thanks, Tom. I mean, first of all, I want to say that the startup economy is the next future infrastructure. It basically enables the great resources of the country, which is basically the people. I don't know if I can say young people or not. I don't think I include myself in there or not, but these people have really a huge potential to create a huge amount of jobs and gains to the economy. And when I think of infrastructure, I think of a super athlete, like your favorite footballer. These guys are truly amazing, but what we usually only see is the result. It could be a major goal, it could be a first place finish, but what we don't see is they have their massive support infrastructure behind them. The coaches, the accountants, the trainers, coordinators, lawyers, designers, and so forth. And that really enables those athletes to focus on what they do best, and that is play the game. And they just keep getting better and better. Just like these athletes, startups need to have the support infrastructure to ease the way in which they do business. And I think recently, because of COVID, we've really been forced to work remotely, and remote working has become the norm. And we're decreasing our dependency on what we call like the traditional infrastructure, like power, bridges, roads, and so forth. And I'm sure we've all said it before. You're at home trying to do work, and all you're saying is, all I need is great broadband. So, it's fast, high-speed broadband, and that is also one of the other key infrastructures that I believe is very important. So, broadband is might be one of the main important infrastructures, and it really enables the future infrastructure, which is the startups. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Yan. I'd like to get some other perspectives on this. NKG, what's your take on the specific role that sort of infrastructure plays for the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, I think infrastructure is super important. It's what enables people to do their business. And I'm looking at infrastructure in terms of both hard infrastructure and critical infrastructure. So from the road networks that allows you to move your product or your service from one point to another, even down to, like you mentioned, broadband internet that allows you to connect with people and build certain solutions, to electricity and other things. So these things are really, really important, especially now that the world is getting more global. So competition and the way people connect is more global. So you're competing with companies and businesses across the world. So having access to very, very enabling infrastructure is really, really important. So that's my take on infrastructure and startups. I think it's what helps people build great solutions.
Excellent. Let me pass that question on to Anna. I really like the point that Nkechi's just kind of made in terms of like competing globally. And so you have hubs which are competing all over the continent, which are helping people build all over the continent, but increasingly building for a global world. And so how do you think about their needs from an infrastructure perspective? There's broadband, but what else is critical? What else is essential for them?
Yeah. I mean, I like to build on what both Nkechi and Yen have contributed so far. And I particularly liked the analogy that Yen mentioned earlier when he gave the example of a star, right? A sports star you see on the field and you see the success and everything, but then behind the scenes, there's a support structure, right? There are the coaches and, all the people who have along the line supported the sports star to achieve what they have achieved. Now, that's the way we see the role that innovation hubs play, right? And just as an update, when you're introducing me, you mentioned 292 hubs, but we're quite excited that 2 weeks ago when we admitted new members and just announced as well, we are now 320 hubs across 51 African countries. And basically what all these hubs do across the continent is form that support system, right? For innovators, entrepreneurs, creatives to come together and build their ideas into successful ventures, basically. And they provide a range wide of support services, right? So whether we're talking about business development support, product development, legal support, access to mentors, investors, access to basically the larger support system and infrastructure needed to successfully build a business and scale, both within scale within a country, across the continent, or even if they're looking to scale internationally as well. Now, another critical support that hubs provide, which also infrastructure, as Yana and Nkechi rightly mentioned, is access to broadband connectivity. I mean, on the continent, we haven't even reached, quarter of our goals when it comes to affordable and reliable connectivity. I think less than 25% of the population actually have access to good internet connectivity, right? And this is something that startups need. It's a critical element of building a startup on the continent. So what all these hubs provide, who all have physical spaces, by the way, members of AfriLabs, is they provide basic infrastructure such as a space to work from, the office space. I mean, office real estate is quite expensive as well. Power, access to even just electricity, internet connectivity, and the like. So these are all things that hubs provide and are critical to supporting entrepreneurs on the continent.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna. I think, definitely critical points. And we're going to come back and talk about sort of hard and soft infrastructure specifically and sort of the differences between those and what's most critical. But if I can have you just sort of talk about how you think about the role of infrastructure in startup development and growth.
Thanks, Tomiwa. So my son is Tommy Day. That's right.
That explains.
Yeah. So just straight to the question. I think when you look at the issue of infrastructure for the ecosystem, you will find, just as the other three speakers have mentioned, that there is really nothing without infrastructure. So it's like you're trying to get from point A to point B, and then there is a big body of water, but you don't have a boat and you don't have a bridge. Are the necessary infrastructure to get you from one point to the other. Now, without this infrastructure, you really cannot go from one place to the other. And when you listen to the way Anna put it, the jobs that the work that the hubs that they support do, you will find that there is a big role, a huge role for private sector to play in providing this infrastructure and providing this support system. But you'll also find out that there's also a very big role for government itself, for government itself to play. And this is the way I like to this is the way I like to put this out. So it's like government must not be on the way, but government must provide the infrastructure, the road, and then stay along the way, so that when startups and venture capitals and angel investors are moving on the way, government is along the way to provide the support, provide regulation, provide speed limits, provide ensure that there are private sector investors that have petrol stations along the way, and all of that. And this is the kind of role and the kind of work that you see something like the startup bill trying to do, just trying to ensure that the right support system, the right infrastructure is in place to support the ecosystem as they move along the road. So infrastructure really critical. The role of private sector, the role of government coming together, working under what's in the startup bill we've called the big tent approach, I think is very critical as we look to move this ecosystem forward. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks. Nkechi, you mentioned hard and soft infrastructure, and I kind of wanted to bring it back to you and just talk about sort of what are the broad infrastructural needs? Like, so you mentioned hard, so which ones are the hards, which ones are the soft? What's most critical for startups? And who's providing at the moment? You know, where are they getting that? Nkechi?
Okay, so the soft infrastructure are things around human resource. So from the financial services, ensuring people have access to basic financial services and healthcare, those are very like soft infrastructure. Hard infrastructure are more the road networks that connect people. Then critical infrastructure are things like the telecommunication access, electricity. The government plays a huge role in providing a lot of these because they are available for the public, like the roads, electricity. But in order for us to do it right, we need to have that, public private partnership to drive some of these things. The government does not have to build all the roads. In so many countries, private individuals and companies build roads and then put toll gates or something to be able to generate the revenue or the capital that they invested plus some profit. I think the government needs to leverage more of those private partnerships to do so. I know when it comes to internet access, that's one thing that has been heavily privatized. Lots of private organizations are able to provide fiber internet to organizations, homes, and the likes. And for electricity, it's something that also I see great value in providing a level of privatization as well, or at least encouraging that public-private partnerships to enable it be more widely available for people. So I'm just looking at all the classes of the infrastructure that is needed and the ways that people can access it more easily. So the government doesn't have to do all of the work, but it can leverage those partnerships with private organizations and even individuals that have the resources to make sure that there's access to quality infrastructure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nkechi. Yeah, and I'm going to bring it to you. And I really like Nkechi's point about sort of the need for sort of like public-private partnerships to drive infrastructure development. I know last year, right-of-way fees dropped dramatically across 19 states when Nkechi started. What kind of changes would you like to see in terms of the way government works with the private sector to drive sort of infrastructure development? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, in terms of telecom infrastructure, there's basically two parts. One is power, and the second one is laying fiber. So in those two aspects, power, typically telecom companies are really trying to generate their own power to power their own equipment. And that could be quite costly. So those costs need to somehow be passed down through that value chain. In addition, laying fiber, having wireless links across the country, technically it's not too difficult to do that. But what happens is that economically, if we don't have a critical mass of subscribers that are going to be off-taking that bandwidth, then the cost starts going up, and therefore the pricing of bandwidth starts increasing. So, what can the government do is, if there's any way to help promote private organizations from having their broadband access networks reach the kind of the non-highly dense areas, because from a commercial standpoint, operators want to focus their infrastructure in the key areas, whether that's Victoria Island, Ikoyi, Surulere, Ikeja, or FCT. But there's a huge amount of the land population that is not adequately served. And I think there's a lot of people in the country, there's a lot of access that needs to be spread out. So that's where I think that there could be some assistance afforded by the government.
Excellent. Let me bring this to you, because you've been working on the bill, and in just your thinking around sort of this infrastructural development between government and the private sector, where does the bill help us move that forward?
Thanks. So I think the bill helps in a lot of ways. Firstly, one of the key things that the bill is looking to do is to protect investors, and I think the people who will be investing in infrastructure will stand to benefit a lot from this. When you look at the work that the hubs do, for example, how does the bill how does government via a bill ensure that the people who are working with hubs, the people who own innovation hubs, the people who provide this, keep the lights on, keep data on, provide broadband for startups, how do we ensure that they're protected? How do we ensure that they get the right tax rebates? How do we ensure that they are able to get some value for investments that they put into these companies? These are all the things that the bill will be looking into. Also, when you look at the part of the bill that sets up the council. So the council also is a group of public sector and private sector entities, individuals that will be in that council. When you look at the work that they will be doing, which will be more of advisory, they will also be looking at what are the critical things that need to be invested in. So when you look at what's happening with the roads, for example, today, where companies are able to invest in roads and then get that as some sort of tax relief, these are the kind of things that the council could be advising the government on in the future. So there are a lot of ways that this could play out, but we believe very strongly that this bill is the beginner, and it sets the right kind of foundation for us to be able to build on supporting those who provide both the soft and the hard infrastructure that will support the ecosystem going forward.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anna, congratulations on getting to 320 hubs across 51 countries. It's pretty incredible. What's the role, infrastructure-wise, the support that you guys provide at the moment? It sounds like some of it's quite soft, but there's also physical presence across different countries. But what's the kind of support that you're providing for startups across the continent at the moment? You're muted, Anna. We can't hear you.
Oh my goodness. I always pride myself in that never happening to me. Well, here we go. So yes, it does. Yeah, so I'll speak on two layers, right? In terms of what AfriLabs, the support that hubs give as critical infrastructure to startups. I think I mentioned some of them earlier, just general support to startups in refining their ideas, to building products, innovative product services, basically revolutionizing industries, scaling, building successful ventures and businesses that would scale, generate revenue, create jobs on the continent, and just generally contribute to the socio-economic development of each African country that they operate in, and the continent as well. Hubs provide, co-working spaces and creative spaces as well that foster collaboration between innovators, entrepreneurs, but other stakeholders as well. So bringing investors into the fold, bringing corporate organizations, development organizations, governments, all looking to the innovation ecosystem to identify solutions that can solve challenges or problems identified. Now, as AfriLabs, what we do to ensure that these infrastructures are strong enough, right? Because at the end of the day, hubs as institutions or hubs as infrastructures also need to be strengthened in order to deliver their mandate effectively. And what we do is build the capacity of hubs. I mean, one of the ways we're doing it is we're building a full hub management curriculum. Over the past couple of years, we've been running a series of virtual and physical workshops with partners, but now we're looking to really standardize the process of our content and our curriculum. And we're working with Strathmore University in Kenya to build a full hub management curriculum, the first of its kind on the continent, by African hubs, for African hubs, to better equip hub managers and staff with the right skills and knowledge to run their hubs sustainably, because that's one challenge we have as well in the ecosystem, but as well as provide quality support to entrepreneurs. But other ways which are very critical, I'm sure, I mean, we've probably spoken about funding and the importance of adequate resources for entrepreneurs in previous sessions, but here it's important, and I'm really glad that the Startup Bill also addresses that. Right, provision of funding opportunities and grants and incentives for incubators and accelerators. And one of the ways that we're dealing with this gap, both for hubs and for startups as well, to support startups, is through an initiative called Catalytic Africa. Catalytic Africa is a partnership with the African Business Angels Network, ABAN, which is a network of angel investors across the continent in over 30 African countries. And what we're doing with Catalytic is that we've set up a matching, a co-investment and matching fund where we aim to co-match, co-invest or match the funds of startups that have been invested in, that are part of the AfriLabs network, that have been incubated by an AfriLabs hub incubator or accelerator by an angel investor. So basically how it works is once an angel investor or an angel syndicate group that is part of ABAN invests in a startup that is, part of the AfriLabs network through hubs, we match it, right? Either a 2-to-1 matching or a 3-to-1 matching. Now, for every matching that is done, 82.5% of it goes to the startup directly in form of a matching grant. For this first pool, we're working with grants. We also have institutional donors that are part of this, with the first pool being supported by the French Development Agency. 10% of it goes to the hubs, right, who are critical in providing follow-on support to the startup, but also providing insightful data on the growth of the startup, right? And this is another importance of hubs and the roles that hubs play for startups, right? Is post-investment, that follow-on support, but also tracking growth to feed back to the group, to other stakeholders and the likes, because we do need data on the continent as well in terms of what works, what doesn't work, and the likes. And then other percentages go to the angel group and the catalytic team. So this is just a few examples of the work we do. Of course, hubs are also very engaged in policy advocacy, even with the development of the Nigerian Startup Bill. Nigerian hubs have been quite active and just contributing insights and knowledge and being part of dialogues and, advocating and the likes as well. So hubs really do play a broad, other than directly supporting entrepreneurs, but hubs really play a broad role in just building the startup ecosystem and working with various stakeholders across board to do so.
Fantastic, thank you. In fact, I really like this matching concept that Catalytic Africa is doing. And I think what's interesting as we move forward, I know some of the mechanisms that are being talked about for the council to consider down the line is how sort of government sort of supports from a funding perspective long-term the ecosystem. Do you have any thoughts around that? I know direct financing of startups is a difficult thing for a government to do, but I like the idea of matching funds where the ecosystem sort of already, or investors are already identifying, startups that have gone through programs, startups that have promise. Is there room for the governments to participate in that? What are your thoughts?
Yes, Tomiwa, I think there is definitely room for the government to participate in that. And in fact, government has done something similar before. As part of the social investment programs between 2015 and 2019, one of the things that the government did was to work with the ecosystem to support startups. We worked with innovation hubs across each of the 6 geopolitical zones. We looked at startups within those hubs, and then we channeled funds to support those startups through the hubs. And this is simply because we understand that government does not play in this sector. So government is not a player, but government can support those who are players and who understand the ecosystem, just to ensure also that there is no misapplication of funds. You're channeling it through the right partners. But building on that and on the learnings that we got from that, we're currently working with the African Development Bank on a program called Investing in Digital and Creative Enterprises. So the African Development Bank is leading a process to raise $500 million for this project. And the commitment on the ground currently for this project is actually already about $600 million in commitment. The project should begin sometime in the first quarter of 2022. And then what that project seeks to do is support the ecosystem across 4 key pillars. One is investment, which you mentioned just now, and how we can look at supporting with matching funds, with government being the first risk taker and being the first, taking on the first loss if there are any losses. Also, the fund is looking to catalyze investment in places that there haven't been that much of an investment. It's tough, for example, to tell a venture capital, go and put your money in Borno, for example, or go and put your money in Imo. Based on the indices that they measure, a lot of people want to invest in startups working in Lagos, working in Abuja. So what this government fund does is de-risk the investments in these other places and sort of encourage and catalyze investments in those spaces. What you also find is that with the role of government working and engaging with the ecosystem, we're learning more and more to understand the ecosystem. We're learning more and more to listen to the ecosystem. And when the startup bill is passed and becomes law, you'll find that it encourages a lot more people to put their funding. And then government also having funds available through the AFDB-led IDICE program. It also then helps to encourage a lot more people to invest across the various parts of the country and look at the various sorts of specific local realities. So if you're going to invest in the Northeast, for example, you should be looking at investing in socially responsible and sustainable projects. That's why we supported the building, for example, of the Northeast Humanitarian Innovation Hub. I led the process of that. I'm working with the American University of Nigeria and the International Committee of the Red Cross. Also, when you look at the whole conversation around the green economy nowadays, working with the World Bank, I actually led the setup of the Nigeria Climate Innovation Center, which is in the Lagos Business School. And that was set up as part of the World Bank's Climate Technology Program. So these are all things that government is doing, looking at areas in which investors are not naturally going into, looking at regions in which investors are not naturally going into, looking at the local realities in those places, and trying to support, make funds available for people to start to look at those areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Ife. For the people in the audience, if you have questions, can you please put them in the Q&A section and I'll pick them up in a moment. But I wanted to move over to Nkechi and just say, in terms of this bill, I know drafting is done, it's moving sort of through the various channels. From an ecosystem perspective, what do you think is critical in terms of helping to get this bill passed? Because now we're getting into like the politics and the everything of it. So just what's your sense of, what we should be doing, whether it's hubs, whether it's startups, what should people be pushing?
I think people should lend their voices to the bill. I think give it life. So share more about it. Talk about it on your page, on whatever handles you have. Give the bill life. For engagements like this, be a part of it. Come for it. Ask your questions. Make it personal. Understand that the bill is for us. It's for the ecosystem. It's for the founders. It's for everyone. So being able to give it life is really, really important. Talking about it, sharing it as much as possible, interacting with it, and the rest, so that it doesn't die off. This is not the first attempt at a bill like this, but this is like the one that has really gained a lot of momentum because of all the stakeholders really came together to make it their own. So giving it life is what we need to do as an ecosystem for hubs, being able to host certain town halls and meetings where we get to discuss the bill, talk about it, and just educating people a lot on the bill. Yeah.
Fantastic, thanks. And yeah, and if I can just ask you, I mean, like, what are your thoughts about sort of engaging with government on these kind of bills and like working together to pass something like the startup bill? Do you have experience with it? Do you have any thoughts about, this particular bill and this particular process, or what can be done better, what should be done better, what else the ecosystem should be doing, etc.?
Sure. Typically, we don't usually engage as a company with the government in terms of lawmaking. But I think, as Nkechi says, is bringing awareness about the bill and creating an environment where people can discuss it, so that they can now begin to gradually influence the lawmakers that are actually a part of that process. I mean, when it comes to making or passing, I don't have much experience in that. I'm not really a politician, so I can't really say much. But I think that the more people that are aware of it, the more likely that it will happen. So that's my view.
Fantastic, thank you. Anna, how are you thinking about engagement moving forward with the bill?
Yeah, I think as the previous speakers have mentioned, really important to get as many voices in the room. When we look at successful bills, startup bills, and acts that have been passed previously in Tunisia, in Senegal, what we've seen is that the more voices in the room and the more engagements and dialogues that happen between the private and the public sector and the ecosystem, the more likely the bill will be passed, right? So it takes work, to be honest. It takes a lot of work, and whoever is involved in the process, no matter how discouraging it may get sometimes in terms of the speed or whatever, the fact is, looking at successful bills that have been passed, with the Senegal Startup Act, for example, AFLAB was quite active in the process. What we saw there is that it took a lot of drafting and back and forth and negotiations and dialogues between the public and the private sector. So that's all I would say. Really get as many voices in the room. Everyone should get involved because this affects all of us. Everyone will benefit from this, but also that tenacity and consistency is needed up until the very end, until we celebrate and throw a big party and say that it's finally been passed. Yeah.
Excellent. Ife, you're in government. We're trying to pass a bill. What does the private sector need to take into account? I've asked all these private sector people, and they're like, let's publicize it. But practically, what else do we have to do? I think Anna actually went into a lot more detail about sort of the kind of engagements that's required. But from your perspective, what else do we need to do just as we're thinking about sort of getting this over the finish line?
So I think, firstly, I mean, it will be a disservice if I'm going to speak about this specific question and I don't give a big shout out to my boss, Oswald Gobadia. He has done the impossible, bringing this ecosystem and government together under the same umbrella to work together on something. And I think the process so far, when you look at the amount of work that has been done, engaging with government regulators, so we've looked at the people who are necessary in government. So NITDA, for example, the Ministry of Communications, the Honorable Minister himself has taken ownership of this bill. and is sort of driving and leading the engagement across various government agencies and institutions. When you also look at the engagement with the National Assembly, because the National Assembly really is really critical when you're driving this sort of bill, because they will be the ones who will end up writing the bill and writing the law anyway. And then when you look at the work that Oswald has driven directly from the office of the Chief of Staff to the President, and also when you look at the fact that the Vice President himself has lent his voice to this, you find that there is sort of an whole of government approach to this. So what the private sector needs to do is to ensure that we keep this on, to ensure that the communication continues to be two-way. So speaking to government and government speaking to the ecosystem. And I believe very strongly that we're on a very good footing. We're marching forward in the right way. We're marching forward in a very good way. And I think this could just be the template for government engagement with the ecosystem going forward on various other issues. So I'm pretty confident that the private sector is on the right path. We should continue to do this. As we get to the last lap, especially in the National Assembly, there will need to be a lot of engagement as they will start to do the various open sessions for conversations and all of that. And the private sector needs to participate in all of these sessions and in all of these conversations to ensure that we get the right bill to the president for assent.
Thanks, Ife. I do agree with you that we need to give a lot of credit to Oswald, as well as to the many people who've worked really hard on this. It's been an interesting process working on this bill, especially given that the relationship between the Nigerian government and the tech ecosystem is definitely not at an all-time high. And so it has been interesting to find as much close collaboration between the ecosystem and the government on this. And like you said, there's an opportunity for it to be a new model for collaboration and kind of like a benchmark or watershed moment in terms of sort of like government and ecosystem cooperation, which is critical. It's hard to move forward if you have an antagonistic relationship between sort of the entity most responsible for infrastructure development and the people, who are dependent on that infrastructure in order to move the country forward. I think I hear you, and I hope everybody who's listening is paying attention in terms of the need to bring to bear our relationships to sort of drive this to a solid conclusion. I know Ife has to jump off right now, but I'm also going to start to take one or two of the questions in the Q&A. Ife, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking some more about this as we drive this to conclusion.
Thanks, Tom.
Have a great day. There's a question from Innocent Uloko here, which is, where do private companies come in? Say Dangote, how can incentives like tax rebates help push private companies into building roads and laying fiber optic cables, for instance, for massive rebates that can actually impact on their balance sheets so favorably until it becomes an incentive? This is an interesting question. Yen, I don't know if you caught the gist of the question, if you should be able to see it in the Q&A. It's an interesting approach. Any thoughts on this? Should Dangote be helping to lay fiber optic cables, or should they stick to cement?
I think, well, is it a core line of the business? I know that there used to be an offshoot of Dangote called, I believe it was called Dancom, which was involved in the business of laying fiber optic cables. So, if that is still part of the business strategy, then why not? I mean, the more companies that can invest into that infrastructure and make commercial sense out of their investment, they should do it. But I wouldn't specifically pick out of companies such as Dangote, only because they are the large African success business story. But there are existing organizations in Nigeria, telco operators, service providers that are in the business of laying fiber, and they understand that market intimately well. So let's not single out a single company. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, broadly, just let me stick with you just for a moment. What kind of incentives do you think the government needs to kind of like put in place here? What's most useful?
Well, fiber is the most important. And one of the main challenges of fiber is usually once you lay it underground, it stays working for 10, 15, 20 years.
Okay.
In Nigeria, the additional challenges is there's road construction, which is not so well coordinated with the underlying fiber in the ground. You have challenges of vandalism. So, each time a fiber is cut, it's a huge amount of outage as well as cost to repair that fiber. So, one of the simple things that could happen is, depending on which organization is responsible, is to coordinate any type of road activity that happens. In Victoria Island or in Lagos, there's in any given day there's at least one or two major fiber cuts, and how do service providers live with this? Because I don't think that the customers are getting their services interrupted once or twice a day. Is that we have to duplicate that infrastructure. So where we thought one fiber was okay, now we have to use two. So and those have run-on effects down to the consumer. So that's where I think that there could be some improvements. Thank you.
Some harmonization of sort of like policy on that front. Okay, I mean, I think that's good. Innocent, I hope that answers your question. There's another question here from Okechukwu Ifeora. How can the startup bill push for changes in our copyright and IP laws, as well as our labor laws, to make them compatible with what the startup bill is trying to achieve? For instance, recently, Portugal just made it illegal for an employer to call his employee, I think I saw that on the weekend or after work, something like that. Also, IP infringements aren't very justiciable at the moment in Nigeria. So how can the startup bill enable our lawmakers to look into these areas of our laws and update them going forward? Again, big questions, no easy ones here. Nkechi, any thoughts about this? You're nodding. I don't know if it's because you don't want your employer to call you after hours or, yeah, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I saw that bill that was passed. Yeah, I don't know if it was Portugal, but he says it was Portugal. So when it comes to protecting IP, yeah, Nigeria doesn't have a very good history with that. And it's not just IP laws, it's laws and the regulatory framework in general in Nigeria. So there are laid down laws for some of these things, but it comes to the implementation and how porous our justice system is. So the startup bill, it does have a section on protecting intellectual property, but there are also drivers of this bill that would also help ensure that these things are enforced. Yeah.
Interesting. I think that's going to be critical as we evolve, especially for people to feel comfortable investing in companies within Nigeria where they have those opportunities. It looks like there's a question in the chat. If you don't mind, people, if we can please put them in the Q&A so it's a little bit easy. But yeah, Shoaibu Zakari is asking, there's an issue with multiple taxation when it comes to telecoms infrastructure. Don't you think government should lay the infrastructure in places such as fiber and let startup users ride on? Okay, Yen, I think this is one that is probably best answered by you as well.
In an ideal world, yes, if the government could give the service for free, but obviously those funds have to come in. And as Ife mentioned, the role of the government is to kind of set the policies and regulations in place to make it easier for companies to do that. I think that in terms of laying fiber infrastructure, I strongly believe that's a private industry-led function. In terms of laying the groundwork for that fiber infrastructure to be laid, in terms of right-of-way regulations, licensing fees, it's up to the government to determine how fast that rollout is intended to be. So if it's easier, it can be rolled out faster. In terms of multiple taxation to telecoms infrastructure, I mean, I think that applies to all businesses, depending on the type of business that you're in. We're taxed by the NCC and various other government agencies. I just see it as part of a cost of doing business. Nigeria's corporate tax rate is not as aggressive as some European countries. It could be sometimes easy to complain about, but I think it's just a cost of doing business, right? So the government has to decide: do we want to make it easier to do business? Do we want a 0% tax, and then all of a sudden, would that change the amount of private investment that's being done in terms of infrastructure? Where is the sensitivity on that? And I think that has to be carefully evaluated.
I mean, I agree with you on sort of our top line tax rates not being as aggressive as, say, in Europe or even North America sometimes. Um, but yeah, I think ease of business and simplicity and not getting taxed by 16 different agencies would definitely make it easier to sort of do business here.
I mean, if it was a harmonized single tax which encompasses everybody else, so we don't have to deal with a dozen different industries at the same amount, I think that in itself would be an ease in itself, the administrative ease.
Excellent. And Kichi, I'm going to direct this to you because I think you have some insight into it as well. Given the various independent laws and policy which exist in parallel and which could significantly impact startups, how can we ensure that in developing this enabling legislation, we aren't blindsided and address possible areas of conflict with existing laws?
So this is why the bill is not being designed in isolation. So many stakeholders have been brought together who understand the regulatory framework and possible, like say, conflicts or existing laws in certain areas. So that is why it's being designed this way. And there's different processes and stages that the bill would pass through before it becomes an act to be able to check this. But this bill is specifically designed for startups and understanding the nuances of what a startup is. So his concern is already being factored in the design of the bill in itself.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's been a lot of consultation already. Various MDAs, ministries, and agencies have already had their input. Wide consultation from lawmakers, and I think there's a lot more of it still coming. So all of that. I think the last thing that's probably worth mentioning in that on an ongoing basis is one of the elements of the bill is a council that comprises government and private sector people reviewing on an ongoing basis the provisions of the bill, the way different startup laws or laws affecting startups interact with one another, and revising those and making recommendations on how those should work on an ongoing basis. So hopefully over time, passing this bill should actually sort of improve the harmonization of various bills affecting the development of technology and innovation in the country. I think someone raised their hand. No, I've just raised mine. 1 second. Let's just see this. Attendees. Okay, I think that's been lowered. If there are no other questions, I think I might pull this to a close. We have about 8 more minutes, and I'm just going to ask sort of in the last few minutes for each person to just sort of share any closing thoughts with the audience. I'm going to start with you, Nkechi.
Okay. So my closing thought is always what I close with, and that is, whenever we talk about this bill, there's so many people that feel this would just become another act or another regulation that would join a huge list of regulations in Nigeria that are not impactful. And for that, I would always say that we need to design this bill with as much optimism as we have. We need to look and believe that what we're doing is going to have an impact and to be a part of that as much as we can. So we need to look forward with so much optimism and hope in expecting that this would make a difference and this would help provide a good landscape for people to build amazing startups that would solve problems that we're facing in Africa, or well, in Nigeria first. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Yen?
Yeah, I think the bill I've read through it seems like a great thing, and I think one of the things that it could address is a lot of the predictability of doing business. So kind of reducing the swings and ups and downs in terms of what infrastructure is available. And as you're saying with the taxes, taxes are fine, but if there's an unexpected tax that shows up, at a later time, it makes the business not predictable. So I think if it can smooth out those risks, it'd be fantastic.
Fantastic, thank you. It looks like we might have lost. Oh, Anna's back. Hi, Anna. Final thoughts as we wrap up.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I dropped out for a bit. Speaking of critical infrastructure. We need to improve our internet activities. Okay, yes. So final thoughts, the ecosystem, I think we've mentioned this a couple of times before, be involved, get your voices heard, be involved in the drafting and the awareness across board, to larger organizations, so corporate, institutional donors, foundations, investors, invest in the bill, in driving it, the activities, because I mean, it basically is to build the country as well. So everybody benefits from quite a number of the things that will be passed in the bill, not just directly for startups, but also looking at other areas as well, you know, looking at investors and protecting investors, providing incentives for investors as well as stakeholders. And then finally, to the government, I mean, this is one process that I'm quite happy that is also government-led as well as, you know, ecosystem-led as well. One thing I'll add is passing the bill is fantastic. We really are optimistic that we'll get to that point. Implementation of the bill is another ballgame altogether. And this is just a call to even the government agencies that will be involved in the implementation of the bill, right? From the Ministry of Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy, happy that the minister is enthusiastic about it, and all the agencies under them, to NIPC and, you know, all the other CAC and, you know, all the other agencies and government entities that will be involved in implementation. Very critical to begin to put the sort of systems in place to act, you know, once the bill is being passed. So yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Yen. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Nkechi. Thank you to Ife, who's dropped off, and to the Ventures Platform team for putting this together. And to everybody who's joined us today, I hope it's been valuable. And I hope that you will take the words that have been spoken to heart and will engage in helping to push this bill. I think one final word I will make from my perspective is, even once the bill is passed, we do need to, as Ife said, use this as a model for engagement with the government. I know we've all got our challenges with the government, but I think engagement is the only way we actually get that to change, and we get the ways that they see us and the way that they work with us to change. And so this is, I think that's really quite critical. I'd also like to thank GIZ and Seddon for sponsoring this session. We do appreciate their support. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.